assumes you're facing two doors. One of them leads to eternal security. The other, well, nobody knows for sure. But one thing is for sure, if you miss the choice, can lose everything. Now here's the most disturbing detail. You already chose one of these doors, even if I never stop to think about it. Your life is already bet on something. Do you believe in God or not? You are sure of your answer. Because if you don't have, maybe He's playing the most dangerous game of all, without even noticing. Life is a big casino, but here we are not talking about roulette wheels and cards. We are talking about its existence. What comes after death? What happens when everything goes out? If God exists and you lived without Him, the consequence may be irreversible. But if He doesn't exist and you lived with faith, what you really missed. In the end, the question is not just God exists, but yes, you can afford to be wrong. The mathematician and philosopher Blaise Pascal saw this reality in a brutally simple way. Belief in God is not just a matter of faith, more logic. The bet is already happening, whether you like it or not. But who really understands the game? Who is really willing to risk infinity? The most curious people bet every day. Make life insurance, even not sure they will die early. Pay health plans, even without disease confirmation. Protect themselves against the unlikely. But when it comes to eternal destiny, most simply ignore the bet. And that's where the mortal error of atheists lies. Today we are going to immerse ourselves in this invisible game, in this inevitable choice, at this incalculable risk. Let's explore Pascal's bet, the fragile certainties of atheism, and reveal what modern science have to say about it. You can even ignore this video. You can go on with life without thinking about it. But one thing I guarantee, you will never be able to say you didn't know. Now tell me, you are ready to play. Have you ever met someone who lived your whole life sure of something, until you realize it too late? That was wrong. The story of many atheists begins with arrogance and ends in despair. As a man who has ridiculed God all his life and, no last sigh, realized he had no answers, or like that brilliant scientist who believed only in what he could touch and measure, until the final diagnosis came, is terminal. You have weeks. Now look at yourself. You can be healthy. Young man confident in his worldview. But what if your tribe is just a thin cloud that hides the abyss? The truth is brutal. Not believing does not change reality. You can ignore gravity. But if you jump out of a building, she doesn't ignore you. You can make fun of eternity. But what if she's there waiting? In the century. And philosopher Blaise Pascal had a balcony that left us perplexed. He didn't try to prove God with religion, emotion, or dogma. He used the sharpest weapon of all, the relentless logic. Pascal's bet is simple and unbeatable. If God exists and you believe, infinite reward, eternal life, sense peace. If God exists and you don't believe, infinite loss, conviction, eternal. If God doesn't exist and you believe, no real loss. You lived one moral life with hope and just ceased to exist. If God doesn't exist and you don't believe, no real gain. Your life is over, period. Now think, which of these bets has the worst risk? Play against God is the equivalent of going into a casino and bet everything you have on the worst roulette wheel possible. One where if you get lost, the consequence is eternal, and it's no use saying don't bet. It is a neutral choice. Don't choose already is choose. It's like being in a car with no brakes and decide not to turn the wheel. Most people live as if eternity were an illusion. Work, have fun, make plans, but ignore the most important question. And if there is something after? Spiritual indifference is a dangerous luxury. And ironically, many of those who reject God live based on irrational betting. Make life insurance, even without being sure they will die tomorrow. Pay health plans, even without disease confirmation. Avoid walking alone in dangerous neighborhoods, even without guarantee that something bad would happen. Protect against minor risks. But when it comes to eternal destiny, play all in the dark. Now the final question. And if you are wrong? Might seem like a simple question, but the answer can cost everything. Imagine a man who spent his whole life believing that the ice was strong enough to support it. One day he steps on a frozen lake. Without hesitation, and the ice breaks. He sinks, desperate, realizes, too late, that your certainty was worthless against reality. Now imagine the opposite. A man who doubted the ice was safe, but just in case, crawled carefully over him. To your surprise, the ice was firm. He crossed safely. What does it teach us? Certainty is no guarantee of being right, and this is the fatal mistake of atheists. Many atheists pride themselves on being rational, say they only believe what can be proved, measured and tested. But there is a curious detail. The history of science is a long list of certainties, destroyed. For centuries, I was sure that the Earth was the center of the universe. I was sure that time was absolute. Until Einstein proved that no. I was sure that nothing could exist without matter. Until quantum mechanics shows what particles can come out of nowhere. i.e., science is not a set of absolute truths. It is a constant learning process, where even the greatest geniuses have ever erred. And then, the great irony arises. The atheist who refuses to consider God because there is no evidence are making the same mistake that criticizes so much in dogmatic religious. He builds his faith upon the science of the moment, as if she were infallible. But what if, in a few decades, human understanding change will be that he is willing to bet eternity itself on this? Another common mistake of atheists is to think that just because something can't be proved today means there is no. In the 19th century, there was no evidence that there were radio waves, but they were there. For millennia, there was no evidence for the existence of bacteria until the microscope revealed an invisible world. Who guarantees that the supernatural is not just something we still haven't been able to measure? Many scientists, including big names like Newton, Einstein, and Planck, believed that the universe was intelligently ordered, and that science only revealed the mechanisms of something bigger. Think science has all the answers today. It's as big a mistake as the old ones, who thought the sun revolved around the earth. The true sage does not say, God does not exist. He says, I still don't know. And if there is even the slightest chance that it exists, it is worth taking a risk. My soul, if you had a rare disease, and a doctor said there is no cure, but another said that there is an experimental treatment, what would you do? Would accept death or try the only hope? Now apply this to your own life. If there is the slightest chance that God exists, it makes no sense to ignore this possibility. The illusion of certainty has already destroyed many people. Many laughed at faith until the last moment, until reality hits, and then it was too late. No final. The question is not who is sure. The question is who can afford to be wrong. Have you ever seen the eyes of someone who has lost everything? A man who wasted youth, threw away opportunities, wasted the days, believing that the future would always give him another chance. until you realize, too late. That time does not return. Now, imagine that this loss is not just for money, career, or relationships. Imagine it to be something absolute, irreversible, eternal. Most atheists live without thinking about it. After all, if God does not exist, life is just that, a short interval between birth and death. No greater meaning. But what if they are wrong? What is the price of being wrong about this bet? The answer is simple. All modern atheism comes from a seductive idea. You don't need God to have meaning in life. Looks liberating at first, but when taken seriously, this idea turns into a sentence of despair. If there is no God, so love is just a biological trick. Morality is just a social construct. Consciousness is a chemical accident. Death is the absolute end. Meaningless. No justice without redemption. This is not theory. See what happened with some companies who adopted atheism as the dominant philosophy. Soviet Union, religious persecution, millions of deaths, a government without transcendental morality. Morris, China, cultural destruction, dictatorship, totalitarianism, French Revolution, chaos, guillotines, social collapse. Without God, everything is allowed. If there is no one to judge us in the end, who can say there is a right and a wrong? Russian philosopher Fyodor Dostoevsky already warned, if God does not exist, everything is allowed. And history proved it. But now, let's bring this to something even more personal. Talk to someone who has completely lost faith, and ask what he feels in the silence of the night. Ask him what happens when the is over. When there are no more social networks, when the music turns off, when the party ends. What is left over? Many atheists avoid this conversation because the answer scares. What we see today: high depression, suicide among growing young people, people looking for meaning in drugs, endless entertainment addictions. This is no coincidence. That's one symptom. Many who forsaken God sought a replacement. Some tried to find meaning in science, others in hedonism, others in politics. But the truth is brutal. Nothing fills the emptiness of the human soul like the belief that there is something bigger than us. Blaise Pascal, the same one who made the bet, described it like this: in the heart of every man there is an emptiness in the form of God that nothing but Him can fill. Life, there's a cruel way to remind us that we're small. An unexpected diagnosis, the loss of someone dear, the moment when everything goes wrong. It's at this time that many people perceive that your castle of certainties, it was made of sand. Many atheists have made fun of God. Until life kept them from their knees, many considered themselves above faith. Until they realized that deep down, always knew something was missing. Atheism's biggest trap is not the lack of God. It's the illusion that we don't need it. Now I ask you, and if you're all betting on the wrong thing, imagine you are in one desert, alone. No maps, no compass, just sand as far as the eye can see. Suddenly, you find one pocket watch, perfectly worked, with detailed gears and one precise mechanism. You take it in the hand. He is funny, complex, perfectly adjusted. Now stop and think. This clock came up there alone, by chance, after billions of years of wind and erosion molding the sand, or he has a creator? The answer seems obvious, and yet, many look to the universe, something infinitely more complex than a simple watch, and insist that he came out of nowhere, no tears behind. Does science really eliminate God? Or does she do the exact opposite? If you pick up any book, no matter how simple it is, you will see that it has a logical structure. Organized letters form words. Words form sentences. Phrases build meaning. If a single letter is out of place, the message may get lost. Now look at the universe. Scientists have discovered that the cosmos follows strict mathematical rules to universal constants, fundamental forces that control everything, since gravity to the chemical reactions. And here's the impressive detail. If any one of these constants was slightly different, life would be impossible. A gravitational force, if it were a little stronger, the universe would have collapsed shortly after the Big Bang. If it were weaker, galaxies would never have formed. The charge of the electron, if it were slightly different, the atoms would not remain stable, and matter would not exist. The speed of expansion of the universe, whether it was a little faster or slower, the stars and planets would never have formed. Scientists themselves call it fine adjustment of the universe, and that raises one inevitable question: chance or intention? If you find a sequence of numbers perfectly organized in a safe, what is most likely? That the numbers randomly appeared, or that someone programmed that? The evolutionary theory explains how life develops, but it doesn't explain how she started. How we go from inanimate matter to living cells, able to grow, reproduce, and think. Imagine one tornado going through one scrap metal and at the end, mounting one perfectly functional plane. This is easier to believe than thinking that chemical reactions, by pure chance, gave rise to the first living cell. Even French Crick, one of the discoverers of DNA, was baffled by the complexity of life. He said, "An honest man, armed with all the knowledge available today, could only say that, in a way, the origin of life seems to be a miracle, and it's exactly that." Now look inside you. Not for your body, but for your mind. You have thoughts, emotions, memories. You have an inner voice, an identity. But where exactly is this? In your brain. Science can map neural activities. Can you tell which areas are activated when we feel fear or joy, but cannot explain that really is consciousness, because we are not just biological machines. What gives us a self? If we were just chemicals and electricity, none of this should exist. But exists, and again the question arises, chance or intention? Contrary to what many think, many of the greatest scientists in history believed in God. Between them, Isaac Newton, the order and harmony of the universe, they can only have come from the mind of an intelligent being and powerful, Albert Einstein. The more I study the universe, but I believe in a higher intelligence. Max White, founder of quantum physics. Science and religion are not enemies. On the contrary, are complementary, and today many modern physicists, by studying the laws of the cosmos, begin to admit that the universe looks designed. Some avoid using the word God, but describe an organizing principle, a mind behind reality. If you see footprints in the sand, you know someone passed by. If you see a picture, you know there was a painter. If you watch a computer program, you know someone programmed you. Now look at the universe. For the complexity of life, for human consciousness, the answer is evident. Science didn't kill God. On the contrary, she gives us stronger and stronger reasons to believe that He has always been there. Now the final question. You will keep betting that all this is the work of chance. Imagine you are facing a plane. He's about to take off, and someone offers you a parachute. You look around and notice something curious. Most people are refusing. They laugh. They say the plane will never crash, that this is that you are being paranoid. Now stop and think. You are 100% sure of that this plane will never have one problem. You would bet your life on it. If there is any minimum chance he can fail, the logical decision is simple: catch the parachute. Because if all goes well, you didn't miss anything. But if the plane crashes and you don't have a parachute, lost everything. This is exactly the logic of Pascal's bet. But instead of a plane, we are talking about your eternity. Throughout this video, unveil the bet we're all already making. Whether we realize it or not, we explore the risks, the fatal errors of atheism, and the evidence that science itself offers us. Now let's join the dots. Pascal's bet is logical. If God exists and you believe, wins it all. If he doesn't exist and you believe, misses nothing. But if he exists and you don't believe, you lose everything. The certainty of the atheist is illusory. Science has already denied many absolute truths of the past, and blindly trust her is a huge risk. Atheism has a high cost. Societies that abandoned God faced moral crises, depression, and nihilism. Modern science has not eliminated God. On the contrary, the more we study the universe, the more we realize its precision and complexity. Everything points to a creator. Many will hear it all and think, I just won't worry about it now. But there's the biggest trap. Don't choose now. Is to choose. If you refuse to decide, is already making a bet. You're already betting your soul on the idea that God does not exist or that it doesn't matter. Now I ask you, you are so sure of it. Life is short. We all know that. A day without warning, the clock too. When it happens, your bet will be made. Imagine that you could go back in time to warn yourself of a terrible mistake. Who committed? Now imagine that your version of the future is trying to warn you at this very moment. You would listen. This is the last chance for reflection. You can go on living as if this bet did not exist, but you won't be able to say no. The final question is simple. You are ready to bet against infinity. Throughout this video, we explore one of the most important themes that someone can consider: the existence of God and the consequences of this gamble. We have seen that this is not just a matter of faith, but also logic, reason, and even science. If you got this far, means this subject has made you anxious. And that is the mission of this channel. Provoke deep questions, challenge fragile certainties, and bring knowledge that can transform your worldview. If you believe this content makes a difference, consider becoming a member of the channel. It helps us to continue bringing complex themes and well-worked for more people. You can also use the super thanks to directly support the channel. But we know that not everyone can contribute financially, and it's okay. Just watch. Liking, commenting, and sharing already makes a huge difference. When you interact with the videos, YouTube understands that this content is relevant and recommend it to more people. So if this video made you think, leave your comment below. What was the moment that most impacted you? Have you thought of this bet before? Let's continue this conversation in the comments. And reminders if you can ignore this bet. But that doesn't mean she disappears. See you in the next video.